Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
And it's the second day's play completed in Hamilton between New Zealand and England, the third test. New Zealand have taken a strong hold of the game, and Australia have done the same in Brisbane, although, of course, they've had lots of interruptions there. So we'll look back at those two test matches. Simon, New Zealand today actually surprising England, I think, with some severe disciplined bowling and actually a tail end flourish as well. And they're in the box seat now, aren't they?
Oh, well, they should win the game from here. It's like the last Test match, but just the roles reversed. England dominated that game, took a huge lead, and then bowled New Zealand out. And it looks like New Zealand are well placed to do the same here. So a lead of 340. They've got 7 wickets in hand, so every chance of setting England 500 plus. And then, well, up to England how they want to approach that. Dominant day from New Zealand. England, their own worst enemies, as is often the case in situations like this, but also I think we should say, really well bowled to O'Rourke and also to Henry as well. But O'Rourke bowled a superb spell after lunch where he picked up 3 for 33, bowled 8 overs unchanged, and he took out 3 key wickets. And once he'd done that, then England were always up against it.
Yeah, I mean, key wickets, absolutely. It's interesting. We're talking as Jacob Bethell as a key wicket, but he is the number 3 now, anointed for England, and Root at 4 and Brook at 5. He took those 3 wickets in 8 balls, and that really knocked the stuffing out of England. They have been able to counter-attack in the past, but it wasn't to be today. And that was a lovely bit of bowling. We've talked about him a few times, haven't we, in this series already? Will O'Rourke, 6'4", born in England, in fact, but very much a Kiwi. And do you know who he reminds me of, actually, a little bit as a bowler, is Morne Morkel. Morne Morkel, the South African, actually a little bit taller than O'Rourke, but a similar style of bowler, hits the bat hard, good pace, round about 90 miles an hour, fairly consistently, and it's that high release and the slight in-swing to the right-handers and making it curve away from the left-handers, which also reminds me a little bit of Morkel. That incessant back of a length deliveries, which hit the top of the bat, and actually it jars that gap between your thumb and your first finger, your index finger, when you're gripping the bat. Bowlers like that jar that sort of joint in the middle between the thumb and the first finger, and just give you a lot of bruising if you're not used to it, because it keeps pushing the bat handle into that V between your 2 fingers. And he's a hit the bat sort of bowler, isn't he? Bowls a heavy ball, and he bowled 3 heavy balls to England today, and they got out to him. Bethell, who was given a bit of a going over, with some good short balls which were actually quite well dealt with, and then the tees are a little bit fuller and sliced into backward point. Then Brook, first ball just back of a length, tried to block it inside edge onto stumps, and then a few balls later, Root getting out, trying to sway out of the line and sort of uppercut it, and tucked up for room and just sort of poked it off the glove almost, or the top of the bat to third slip. So he really made a major... What?
Well, it's more backward point gully, I think, really.
Okay. And caught in the backward point region, and it just major inroads there, which England never recovered from. But perhaps we should just go back to the start of the day, because that was a period when New Zealand were batting with their last pair that irked both of us, wasn't it?
Well, New Zealand resumed on 315 for 9. The new ball was a handful of deliveries old. You've got a number 8 and you've got a number 11. So the first over was to Will O'Rourke. Okay, England were hoping they were going to dislodge him with the new ball first over. But O'Rourke, as we've seen in this series, he's prepared to sort of get in line and block it and play for the player at the other end, which he did. So he played out the first over of the day. So England bowled the second over to Santner. Okay, he's 15 on out. He's batted in good style the previous evening, but it's a new ball. England got 1 wicket to get through. Everyone's back on the boundary. Okay, right, that's a tactic we've seen many times before. But then they just keep everyone back. So he gets to the 5th ball of the over and he can knock a single for the most part. Sometimes he took a single off the 4th ball of the over. He's taking a single off the 5th ball of the over. And so it meant that O'Rourke sometimes only had 1 ball to face at the end of the over. And it seems... there's enough in this pitch. There's a bit in it, as New Zealand showed when they bowled with a new ball soon afterwards. There was enough in the pitch for them to get wickets. So why not try to get Santner out? Okay, you can change your tactics if it doesn't work. Give it 3 or 4 overs. Okay, if he starts to welt it around, then yeah, have a rethink. But at least try to get him out early on, put some pressure on him, and the fact that you get towards the end of the over, he might play a shot. If you just get one to nibble away or whatever, he nicks it a slip or nicks it to the keeper, something like that. Anyway, so what happened is they were out there for an hour, just over an hour, trying to get that last wicket, which is frustrating. Stokes was getting, you could see Stokes brought himself on. You could see a bit of frustration on his face as well. And for the openers, it's not great, is it? When are we going to bat? When are we going to bat? And we can't get this last wicket. And it also puts more overs into the seamers who'd bowled 82 overs on the first day, unchanged. There was no spin or anything like that. So they ended up bowling 97 overs of pace, and it's all that accumulation of frustration. And actually, it was no surprise that England collapsed today after that, because it kind of set the tone for the day, that first hour, and you could feel it. It's funny how sometimes you can feel something when you go to the cricket or when you watch cricket, and that's what it felt like today. Even though the sun was out, and you think good batting day, New Zealand scored nearly 350, but England collapsed. It was just one of those days for England. And they have them from time to time, don't they? And you feel like a side as good as this shouldn't be having a day as bad as this. I mean, it was an appalling day for them. It really was. It was a shocking day for them.
Yeah, and as you say, started badly. No, I don't understand that tactic at all. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And, we are great fans of Ben Stokes as a captain, but he does seem to consistently get that bit wrong. I've no idea what the philosophy behind it is, because as a bowler, if you feel like and funnily enough, that Mike Atherton today in his Times article has written a piece about that section of play, and he's called it a hoop-de-doodle session. And what he meant by that was he's coined
a new one on me.
Well, yeah, it's Elmore Leonard, the great crime writer, who refers to passages of a book where nothing much happens as the hoop-de-doodle bit. So in a chapter, there's a bit at the start which is the sort of setting up the scene, and then a bit in the middle which is sort of blocking and pushing it around, and then something happens at the end of the scene or the end of the chapter, and the bit in the middle people skip, because there's not much happening. And this was a way of Atherson's way of describing that period of play. And as a bowler, if you're bowling and you've got all the men back for 5 balls of the over against the number 8, you don't try as much. You're not as intense as a bowler as you would be if you've got the men in and you've got slips and gullies and so on. It's almost like that few balls is irrelevant, and then you only focus when you've got, say, that one ball to bowl at the number 11. And actually bringing all the fielders in against the top order player, the number 8, will force him to play differently, and force him to maybe try and hit one off the length or off the line, which he might not wanted to otherwise. So it puts him under pressure as well. So it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you could just have 3 balls at that number 8, get him off strike, but you want to bring the field in at some point, and I just don't get it. And as you say, England, as a result, were on the back foot, really.
Yeah, in the end, the wicket fell to a really good ball from Matthew Potts. He bowled Santner with an excellent delivery. He just shows what was there, with that relatively new ball and what is there in the surface. Of course, what England were hoping is they were hoping to be able to do that, after 10 minutes play or 5 minutes play or whatever, and it didn't work. It just became more and more frustrating. But you could see it playing out from very early on. You had that feeling. You're watching it. I know sometimes actually when you're watching from a distance, you can actually see something a bit clearer than when you're right up and right inside it. Anyway, look, we've seen this tactic so many times before. Lots of captains go to it, but what captains generally speaking do is bring the field up towards the close of the over. But England just had the field back, and it was kind of like a real sort of patience game. And I think they're hoping that Santner would take it on and try and hit one in the air or something like that and get caught, and it would be all over. But, I mean, they didn't do too much damage in terms of runs. 32 runs, but I mean, very useful runs. Turning 315 into whatever it was, 340 odd. but it was also the hour in the field, kind of the wasted energy, the frustration as well. So, there was that aspect to it. Of course, okay, look, you can have the field up and Santner gets away, he hits two over the top or whatever. But at least then you can change tack then, but you can't change tack once you've, once you set the field back and someone gets in. Santner had a net for whatever, 20 minutes, 40, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. On the other side of it, of course, is you say, well, from the New Zealand perspective, well, just take the single if it's there on the first ball. But then, of course, then you do expose O'Rourke to more of the over. So you can understand why New Zealand didn't take the single, just played a patient game, and that's their way of playing. And in this match, it's worked out for them. Of course, look, England are 2-0 up in the series. They play really well. But I think just that feeling of, if you're going to be a top-class side, and this side should be challenging for the World Test Championship final, they're good enough to do that, and they're not. And I think the day they had today, I think sort of shows perhaps why they're not, even though you feel they should be. Does that make sense?
No, I think it does totally, and I think that we've heard Stokes being a little resistant when people say to him, why aren't you more ruthless? And he resents that word being used. And I think it's because England are playing this enterprising brand of cricket. They've sort of revitalised Test cricket and helped other nations do the same. No doubt they're playing something which people want to pay to watch, but it is not necessarily recognised by the points in the table. And I think there's a sort of disjointed situation, isn't there, between entertaining performance and points on the board, and I think he perhaps doesn't. That's why he almost says let's put the World Test Championship aside. I don't understand it. He goes, I don't get the points, the way it's calculated and all that. I think he's in denial in a way about the fact that you have to play ruthless cricket to be able to win this tournament, and he's not prepared to do that. He wants to do things his way. And therefore, England are destined to be sort of mid-table because they don't apply that ruthlessness tag to some of these situations. They want to let the players play their way. And that was reflected in how England batted as well. Really.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the bowling, it seems to me, the hour today, it seems to me that England sort of pride themselves on taking the positive option, and it didn't seem as if they took the positive option. I think that's one of my points. Certainly early on, new ball, try to get Santner out. That's the positive option, it seems to me. And I'm not saying this in hindsight, because I was saying it at the time as I was watching it, and I can show you the WhatsApp messages to justify that if you want to see them. So that there's that. And the thing is, I think England they don't say we're not ruthless because they go out to try to win every match. I think they do go out to win every match. But I think just watching them over the last couple of years, I think the main look, most of it is fantastic. Three quarters of it, whatever. Hard to quantify, but is fantastic. It's very watchable, but what they don't do enough to me is they don't adapt to situations. And I think sometimes you've got to adapt to a situation. You can't always sort of play the same way. Sometimes you do have to just do something a bit different. And look, the bowling was an odd thing today, but and the batting, I don't know, they had a kind of inevitability about it when they started batting after that first hour. But, fair play to O'Rourke, and there was something in the pitch. I sensed this in the first day. There was enough in this pitch to help the bowlers. A little bit of uneven bounce. There was a bit of swing today, although, it was with Southey, for example, it was, really was from the arm. But this O'Rourke, he's a talented young bowler, and he's got something, and, that was a big aspect of the day's play. Let's not, we've touched on it already, let's not underestimate that. He bowled well. It was an excellent spell. It really was. And so, it wasn't all about England just frittering their wickets away. He bowled really well.
Is it possible to be ruthless and entertaining? Discuss. I mean, maybe the two are just disconnected, and you can't be one and the other at the same time.
Well, Australia weren't they? When they had that, but they had a top-class side. They were ruthless and entertaining, weren't they? Scored at 4 and over, and they put everyone to the sword. Manchester City in football, when they were at their best. Clearly, they're not at their best at the moment. They're having a massive dip for whatever reason that is. But they were entertaining, and pretty ruthless as well. They didn't let the other team have the ball, and were thrashing teams left, right, and centre. They didn't win everything, of course, but I mean they won a lot of Premier League titles. I suppose it's about ultimately it's about how good this England side are, and I think they've got lots of good aspects, but they're probably not. They're not yet, and perhaps they never will be. With this group of players, then will be an absolutely top class side in the way. Well, certainly not in the way the West Indies were in the 80s or the way Australia were in the 90s and into the 2000s. They're a good side with lots to admire, but they probably haven't quite got that level. And one of the reasons is look at the top order. As a bowler, you feel you can get them out, don't you? And there's a few in that England order that you feel you're always in with a chance as a bowler. And certainly, Matt Henry is in with a chance when he's bowling to Zach Crawley.
It certainly is. Of course, it started, that England innings, with the familiar tale of Southey to Crawley and lots of boundaries. 4 boundaries in Southey's first over, and actually 2 really good shots. Well, in fact, all the shots are pretty good. 2 off drives and 2 straight drives. One of them not quite timed, but another one absolutely thumped back past the bowler. And I don't know what Southey... I mean, Southey was literally just delivering throwdowns again, and Crawley was saying thank you very much. But that pitch definitely reacts well to bowlers who bend their back and just put in just that little bit of extra vim into their deliveries. And Henry is one of those. He's got a whirly sort of action, and he really bends his back and hits the pitch hard, and he gets that response which Southey, with a more kiss the surface type of delivery, can't seem to find. And Henry getting his man again, Crawley. He did get a couple of runs off him, but at least he opened his duck against Henry, sort of thing, after 4 dismissals. But was it 5 in the end?
5 runs he scored off him, so he's 5 for 5 off 22 balls against Henry in the series.
And it was a strange dismissal, actually, this one, because whereas in the past Henry's got in with full deliveries which have either found the edge or got through between bat and pad, this one was a bit shorter, and Crawley played a very loose shot. I mean, he tried to sort of work it on the leg side and got a leading edge, and actually it was a brilliant catch by Henry, diving forward to his left, and there was a few reviews before it was proved to be out. But it was a pretty tame shot, actually, by Crawley. I don't know what he was trying to do with it. It was loose and indeterminate, and a leading edge, and another Henry dismissal. So a terrible return from Crawley so far in the five attempts at the crease. His best score is 21, and he's just looked awful.
Yeah, he struggled. He had a really tough time of it. Happy to come home from New Zealand for Christmas, I should think. And then Duckett got one that just came back in from Henry. It shows what you can do. This is the point. It shows what you can do with a new ball. Okay, England played a few shots, but they picked up a couple of wickets with the new ball. And it was one of those. It was so plumb that Henry was celebrating. He was going, yes, I've got that, even before the umpire raised the finger. And Ben Duckett, he knew as well. There's no point even think about reviewing. Well, he would probably flit it through his mind, but he knew he was absolutely plumb. So England suddenly 2 down under pressure, having a poor morning. They get to lunch though. Root and Bethel surviving. England 54 for 2 after 10 overs, scoring at 5.5 and over. Of course they were. And then came that spell that we talked about earlier from O'Rourke. So, fair play to him. Really well bowled. There was also one thing that happened in between, was that Pope very nearly ran out Root to get off the mark. So Pope came in, turned one into the onside. Where did he go? Was it onside or offside? Anyway, it was a short single, and set off for a single. Onside. And if the throw had hit the stumps, then he would have run out Root. And that was Pope to get off the mark. But anyway, Root didn't last that much longer. And England were 82 for 5. And from there, you need something sensational, don't you, to come back in the match. Pope and Stokes together put together a 50 partnership. But then, wouldn't you know it, Yoz, wasn't so New Zealand in this test match, they made the change. They went away from 4 pace bowlers. They brought in Santner. It worked with the bat because he made significant runs, really significant runs actually. And then he picks up 3 for 7. He gets rid of Pope in his first over. That was an indeterminate shot, really. Okay, there was a bit of grip, but it wasn't like it was quite a good ball, but it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't sort of Indian spin, was it, or Pakistan spin, or anything like that. I mean, he doesn't sort of give it much of it. Well, okay, the case of the defence for Ollie Pope then, fine.
Well, no, I'm not going to give him a case for the defence. I'm just going to say he didn't play it particularly well. He pushed hard at it.
Yeah.
It maybe surprised him slightly with the bounce and turned, and it was a tame dismissal. You're right, and the trouble is Pope.
It was caught at slip.
Caught at slip. I mean, against spin, Pope does look all at sea, really. I mean, early on, until he gets a kind of sense of the pace of the pitch and the style of the spinner, he just tries to go at the ball too hard, and that was a case in point. And he was caught at slip. More on the game in a moment, but we're just going to remind you briefly of our special Ashes 1974 5 series, the great series dominated by Thompson and Lilly, of course, which is on our Analyst Plus site. You can go to that by going to patreon.com/theanalyst25.
Before the break, we left the action with Ollie Pope out. Ben Stokes had actually reverse swept Santner's first ball for 4, and then he tried to slog sweep him, missed it, was LBW, so Stokes was on his way. Second wicket for Santner. He hardly bowled. You think of Bashir, didn't bowl at all yesterday, and actually when he did bowl eventually later in the day's play, the game was something like 150 overs old before he actually got a bowl. And then Santner picks up Carse as well. Carse forcing back a return catch. It was actually England's sort of lower middle order and tail was pretty tame actually. It was not great batting after some good bowling at the top from Henry and superb bowling from O'Rourke. The rest subsided, and this much vaunted lower order that England have, Atkinson and Carrs and Potts to some extent, they all went tamely. Atkinson poking to mid on, Potts with Bashir for coming out a massive swipe and hit the ball up in the air. It's a complete contrast actually from when New Zealand had played, where they tried, they really tried to keep England out there, frustrate them, try and add the runs incrementally. England just go hard at it and hit the ball up in the air, give catches, and on you go. And so after 30 odd overs, England are back in the field again. After bowling 97 overs with seamers in the first innings on a warmish day, they're out there batting for 30 odd overs, and they're back in the field again.
Yeah, Jimmy Anderson didn't even have time to finish his crossword. I wonder how he felt actually seeing that, because of course for a number of years he was the sufferer of that, seeing England bowling loads of overs and then seeing England capitulate with the bat or score 500 very, very quickly, and suddenly he's out there again. And now his charges are doing the same in this match. I mean, I suppose it's tempting to call this the end of term sort of performance. And England have played 17 tests this year. So there is a sort of an ennui, isn't there, slightly, going kind of, which you feel sort of percolating through the team, and you want to resist saying that because it's a cliche, but it seems to happen quite often. I mean, it happened in the summer, didn't it, with that Sri Lanka match as well at the Oval, where it was just sort of lazy cricket, but other teams are up for it. They want to get a little bit of a kind of revenge or whatever for losing a series, and have a feeling that they're on the up again, and not just totally demoralised. So England are not very good at looking out for those sort of signs, those sort of traits, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I said, there were some mitigating factors today. That New Zealand did bowl, pretty well with a new ball. Henry with a new ball, and then O'Rourke was excellent after lunch. So it wasn't just a case of England going out there and whacking it up in the air, and getting out the streamers and the party poppers and all that sort of stuff, and putting the clown hats on. It wasn't that. There was some good bowling from New Zealand, and they're not a bad side, New Zealand. England have outplayed them in this series. I mean, they've hammered them twice, and huge credit to them for that after what happened in Pakistan. But when they have a bad day, England, they often have a real shocker, and as happened in Pakistan, as happened in India, as happened, the last sort of part of that Sri Lanka Test match. It was pretty ordinary cricket. Really, apart from the odd exception, Jamie Smith's innings at the Oval, which seemed as if it was going to give England a bit of a chance. But there we go. It only takes 10 balls to bowl the side out, and England were on their way. So here we go then. New Zealand. Just talk about ruthlessness. Okay, I won't spend too much time on this, but New Zealand could have enforced the follow-on. They did not. They did not. And you can think back to Wellington on England's last tour, where was it Wellington? Yes, it was Wellington, was it? You think back to Wellington on England's last tour, where they did enforce the follow-on, and you could sense a bit of danger there, and New Zealand scored 400 and odd and won the game by one run. Okay, brilliant game of cricket and all tight and everything. But so New Zealand said no, and obviously the sensible thing was not to put England into bat again. The sensible thing was to bat again, which is what they did, and try to build a huge lead, and they're halfway to doing that, 340 ahead. They did lose Latham. He played on to Atkinson, then a partnership between Young and Kane Williamson. Williamson looks booked in. Young, in the end, succumbed to the short pitch tactic. Stokes banging one in, and Young hitting it out to deepish mid-wicket. And then, perversely, the last wicket of the day, if the day kind of it started as it ended, with England getting O'Rourke early, then perhaps it might have been a different day. But they found a decent ball to get rid of O'Rourke caught behind. But by then, I think too much damage was done. What would you think would have to happen now for England to have a chance in this game, yours? The last 7 wickets for 60, 70 runs, and then a world record run chase?
Well, I mean, this England side they're mercurial, aren't they? So if they come back tomorrow and bowl well, England, and knock New Zealand over for, I don't know, 250, what does that mean? They have to chase about 450 to win. I mean, I can't see them doing it on this pitch, actually. There's enough there, isn't there? It's got just a bit of extra bounce and movement, and you're never quite in. And certainly the ball, when it gets a bit softer, it seems to be harder to time as well. A few people have been caught in the outfield driving the ball. So, I mean, it's New Zealand's game now, isn't it? Unless England can execute some kind of dramatic collapse and leave themselves 400 to win. But it looks unlikely, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even 400 to win. What's the world record? I think 418, isn't it? I mean, you could. It's this sort of scenario where the world record might eventually be beaten by somebody, i.e., quite a fast-forward game in the early part of the match, and then one side leaving the other, 420, 430 to win in the best part of 2 days or something like that. Yeah, that's the scenario. But on this surface. Paul Collingwood afterwards was saying, this is a special team, we can do special things. But I remember him saying that before England had a difficult chase or difficult batting situation in the second test in Multan. Of course, they fell in a heap that day as well. So, I mean, cricketing logic, the history of the game, the way the game's played. Look, this game feels a carbon copy of Wellington, where England won by 300 runs. It might not be that sort of margin of victory, but it's hard to see New Zealand squandering this position. We can just cut this little bit out and play it in about 2 days' time when England chased down 450 for 2 to win the game, but it looks unlikely. Although they did produce something sensational at Edgbaston, didn't they? That Root and Bairstow partnership against India a couple of summers ago, which was one of the most phenomenal victories that I think any England team have produced, and certainly perhaps the most phenomenal victory of the Brendan McCullum era.
Look, if England win this match, I'll eat
this piece of paper.
I'll eat this page of notes.
You've actually made some notes, Giles. You've made some notes.
I can't read any of them, actually, so, never mind. So, listen, we should just quickly talk about Australia-India. A century for Steve Smith today. His first for 26 innings in Test cricket. His 33rd in Test cricket, so he's still 3 behind Joe Root. And he's out of the top 10 Test match batters now in terms of rankings, but he certainly came back today strongly. He didn't start that well, actually. He looked pretty scratchy at the beginning and had a few sort of streaky edges and things, but he got into his work, played some lovely drives down the ground, a couple of pull shots, some offside cuts when the Indian bowlers dropped short. So vintage Smith towards the end, but he was very, very much upstaged again by Travis Head, 150, and I think at one point Steve Smith had crawled his way to 50, and Travis Head was on about 40, and Head then got to 100, with Smith getting about 10. So it was a stunning partnership, though, an absolute rollicking of the Indian bowlers. 241 they put on, Smith and Head, to put Australia in a powerful position at the end of the second day, 405 for 7. Obviously, they've lost a lot of time, so the question is, with a pitch looking pretty good, will there be time to force a result?
Yeah, I mean, India need a good batting day, don't they, in response? If they have a good batting day, then it just makes it that much harder for Australia to force the running from here. But the way the last game went, you wouldn't put it past the Australians to put India under pressure in their first innings and try to make the running. It's interesting, afterwards, actually listening to Smith and Head talk about the day's play, they actually gave some credit to the top order. They said what they were able to do, well, they didn't score many runs. They were able to resist for a long time and just take some of the sting out of the Indian bowlers and take some of the hardness out of the ball as well. Of course, Bumrah picked up 5 today, and the rest.
He got the first 5 actually, didn't he?
And the rest not very many.
Yeah.
I mean, I switched on. I was watching the England game, and I saw him get rid of McSweeney, caught at slip, and you thought, aye, here we go. It was 38 for 2. And then he got Labuschagne out, it was 70 for 3, but then that fantastic partnership. I mean, Travis Head, I said this in the last test match, India must be absolutely sick of the sight of him, mustn't they? I mean, he's a fabulous player, dangerous player. Who's going to? We perhaps should leave people with this thought: who's going to score more runs in the next Ashes series, Harry Brook or Travis Head? We've got a year to think about it, and a year to see what's going to happen. But it's quite a good question, isn't it? Who's going to be more successful?
It's a good contest as well. It'll be fascinating to see. Obviously, a fair bit will depend actually on what bowlers Australia have by then, because you do feel they're still reliant on those 3 kingpin seamers, and will they be still firing on all cylinders in a year's time? Well, I mean, I think it's important for Australia that they are, because they don't seem to have a huge amount. I mean, I know Scott Boland is a very handy support bowler, but those 3 guys, Cummins, Hazelwood and Stark, are so key to Australia and will put Harry Brook under massive pressure. But if one of them is missing, you sort of feel like there's an opportunity. Well, anyway, it's a long time away, and lots to happen between now and then, of course.
We're doing what Ben Stokes has said the other day that he should stop doing, which is talking about the Ashes. He says, "It's probably my fault. We talk about it a lot, and they have set their stall out. They've said we're planning for the Ashes, but now it's sort of time to take each match or whatever as it comes." Well, they didn't take today as it comes particularly well, but I mean they're allowed a bad day, I suppose, in the series because they have played excellent cricket so far. And they have entertained everyone, and then another big crowd today at Seddon Park. The crowds have been good. Generally speaking, the weather has been good, although some talk of some showers around tomorrow, which might just extend the game a bit. But I mean, if England could get out of this one, it really would be something. So dominant are New Zealand after 2 days.
Enough of our hoop-de-doodle talking. Go for some real drama to our sister site, The Analyst Plus, which is at patreon.com/theanalyst25 for that brilliant series between England and Australia in 1974-5. Patreon.com/theanalyst25. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time.
We've got another episode in that series out in the week, but before that we'll be back with our review of the 3rd day. Thanks for listening. Goodbye for now.